Tobacco-Free Florida knows how hard it is to quit nicotine, which is why we offer different quit options to choose from for free, like 24/7 quit coaches available over the phone and free 2-week starter kits of quit aids. We're even experimenting with 80s pop music.
I'm giving you up, giving you up, giving you up. I'm letting you never come back to stop. I'll never come back to stop. I'll never come back. I'm giving you up.
Or maybe we'll just stick to the ways we know work. Visit tobaccofreeflorida.com or call 1-877-YOU-CAN-NOW for free nicotine patches.
Welcome to Women Winning Divorce with your host, Heather Quick. Heather brings over 20 years of law experience that advocates and empowers women to achieve happier and healthier lives. Each week, we provide knowledge and guidance on different aspects of family law to help lead women through the difficult and emotional legal challenges that they are facing. Listen in as she discusses issues including divorce, custody, alimony, paternity, narcissism, mediation, and other family law issues to provide insight on the journey of women winning divorce. Welcome to the show. I'm Julie Morgan, and I'm joined by your host, Heather Quick. How's it going, Heather?
It is going great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. You know, I was thinking about the storm that just came through that really, devastated Southwest Florida. Didn't do too much here to us here in Jacksonville. Our thoughts are definitely with those in Southwest Florida. But I ate too much of my goodies,
Oh, that can happen, can it? Like there's raining, not a lot to do.
Exactly.
Eat a little bit extra. I hear you.
I ate a lot of bit extra, but we're not going to compare.
Well, you got to do what you got to do to get through it. So
Exactly. See, Heather, you speak my language.
I understand you. I do.
I appreciate that. So today's topic is parenting plans. Let me ask you this, Heather. Does the state of Florida tend to favor one parent over the other?
They really don't. Despite maybe, my personal beliefs and bias, it has become more equal, at least in the way the statute is. And I think that certainly does reflect the society now. I mean, we are a different, as far as parents' involvement with their children and fathers being actively involved in the parenting of their kids. It's more common than it was even 20 years ago.
Okay. All right. Because, the first thought that comes to my mind, and I'm sure other people listening to this as well, is that the mother, usually gets full custody.
And that's just not true. And that's why we call it time sharing, not custody, because you remain the parents of the children and you're to share the time. And, the thing is, the way the law is written and approaches this is based on, I think, ideal situations. And that's what we got to remember. I mean, that's the ideal that, hey, you may no longer choose to be married, but you've got to work together with your to raise your children and communicate. And that's why now there is what's called a parenting plan to really help the folks who can't agree or who don't know all the things that they don't know that there will be to agree on, give some guidance and more of an equality, which if you get along, it's not that big of a deal. If you don't get along, it can just create even more contention, I will say.
Okay. All righty. So let's talk about this. This is the topic, parenting plans. You kind of touched on it just now, but can you define for me what exactly is a parenting plan?
The basic idea of the plan is to outline really the time sharing agreement, meaning where the children are going to be, the schedule as to, they're going to spend, say, every other Thursday through Monday with dad, and then the opposite with mom, how all the holidays will be outlined, what times the exchanges occur, tries to address those holiday weekends, and how do we deal with it when there's a little bit of change to the plan that applies to children in school, because it adapts. it looks at maybe their school-wide calendar overall, so it tends to follow that. And it talks about communication and outlining, hey, how are you as the parents going to not only spend time with the children, but how are you going to communicate? And, what are you going to do? What are you not going to do?
Okay. Is this a requirement?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And why is it necessary? What is, I mean, it seems like it would be necessary just to make things easier, but it may go deeper than that.
The, you know, it's necessary because a lot of issues come up and during the life of your children, obviously. And these are the rules. Basically, these are the rules that you're going to play by. And that is in the event that you two can't agree. So there are, I'm sure, so many parents get divorced, they have the parenting plan, and things go along just fine. And they agree they can adapt and, they still can communicate or whatever. There are others that just cannot. And so they need rules and guidelines that, hey, listen, this is how often you're going to contact the children. This is how we're going to handle the exchange of the children. This is how we handle the schooling. This is how we're going to handle healthcare. This is how religion will be addressed. I mean, you can really get so far into it that it gives you all the rules. I mean, it's difficult to do everything, but we try to do a pretty good job.
And it sounds like with this particular aspect of the divorce, it's going to take some time to put this together because you named a lot of stuff: time sharing, education, healthcare. That's a lot.
It is. And so there are, and I think we've talked about this before, and I know I've used this word guidelines. There's guidelines that people follow for parenting, guidelines that we follow for child support. So there is, let's say your boilerplate parenting plan, which is a great place to start because, I mean, and some people, they're like, fine, we'll do that. Others want a little more specificity. So you kind of start with a boilerplate and then you really dig into the different issues. And most of the time, we work with our clients and obviously through the representation, if there have been things that have been at issue, we try to say, hey, let's address this in the parenting plan. Like, let's know, I foresee this will be an issue in the future. And if we can address it now in a parenting plan, that would be ideal. And, that is a process that can happen in mediation. And when we're working through things, doesn't happen necessarily in front of a judge because, I mean, the very specificity of the times and the days, the judge is not going to give you this customized, personalized plan. I mean, you're going to ask for it, your attorney will, but there are certain things that you're only going to get if the two of you can come to an agreement and compromise.
Okay, so something you said and makes me want to ask you this. There is a basic plan, and then you can go from there to really customize it.
Yes, that to me is the ideal. And that's what we work to do with our clients. And of course, and it takes the involvement of both sides, Some people prefer more generalized parenting plans because then there's a little bit more room for interpretation, and that works for a lot of couples. Some really want every single thing written down. Excuse me, and that is and for there's some people that's absolutely what they need.
It seems like that could, I don't know, you can run into some problems with that one, with everything not written down, leaving it up to interpretation.
Well, yeah, I mean that sometimes that's more problematic, and that comes in, with really you've got to communicate with your lawyer. You need to know, hey, I think this could be an issue. And, in our expertise, we've done hundreds of these. So you can identify things like, okay, I anticipate this could become an issue. What are your thoughts about this? I think this would be something we want to address. And that is really how you help folks, because the result, otherwise you're going to court, and you just don't want to be returning to court often.
But what if I cannot agree on this with my husband? I can't agree on it. Will the judge then say, okay, well, I'm going to do it, and this is how it's going to work?
Indeed. Indeed, he will. And he'll hear your side. He'll hear your husband's side during the trial. And that'll be it. And so the judge will make a decision.
All right. But that does not sound like that's the ideal arrangement.
It never really is, because, even in a trial of 2 or 3 days, I mean, think about it. You have a lot of things that have gone on in a marriage and with your children. So that's a very short amount of time. The judge is going to make some decisions. Your attorneys are going to draft those out. And at the end of the day, I do believe that if you're able, some couples just can't, they can't. But the way I approach it, and our team approaches it with clients, is, okay, mediation is a time, particularly on these parenting plan things, particularly on things that really matter to you, or you believe really matter to you at the moment, as far as the time or schooling or whatever. Now's the time to do some compromising, because in mediation is where there may be things you want that you're not going to get in court and from a judge. And that's where you need your lawyer to help you understand, like, okay, if you want this, you're going to have to give on something else, and understand this is the only way to get, say, I want them every Christmas Eve. Not going to happen in front of a judge unless your spouse agrees, because they alternate that on the holidays. And that's just an example. It could be, I want every first half of the summer, or I want to make sure we can go on a family trip, and that includes this particular thing. So that is what is very helpful, I think, for anyone going through this process, to understand some of these things I want, you're going to have to be willing to give. Maybe not. Maybe your husband will be like, fine, I don't care. But be prepared that there may be specific things that are important to him. Again, judge is going to alternate the holidays and rotate through. That's going to be extremely standard.
Okay. So really, it would behoove you to come up with the agreement before you go before the judge.
Absolutely. If it's at all possible, it is always worth mediating, and maybe mediating a second time, and maybe mediating only on those issues, because then you get something definitely more customized, and things can be determined between the two of you that a judge just isn't going to do.
Would you say that the parenting plan is where you possibly spend the most time with your clients?
Certainly, yes. Like, certainly, if that's the big issue, Julie, some cases it is the money. And the money really drives everything, on whether it's the support or how the property is going to be divided. And then we have other cases where it's the children. So it's gonna vary, but very often we do spend a lot of time, certainly, on that.
I wonder when clients come into the office, or when they get started with this process, if they really understand how important the parenting plan really is.
I think that many folks don't initially, because they don't, it's just not something they've had to deal with or been within. It seems weird, right? If you've never been divorced, you're like, what? We have to have this 20-page document to determine how we're going to talk to each other, and what we're going to do, and how they're going to transfer the kids and exchange them, and holidays. Yeah, it does seem weird, but it's important, because what the courts have found is that if they, I think, I don't know why they started doing this, but I think they found there was too much unknown. And so the goal is that this covers so many areas that maybe that can keep these individuals from returning to court because things weren't addressed.
Okay, we need to touch on that. You said a 20-page document?
I knew that would get you. And
Okay.
that's your basic. I know. It's a lot.
Okay, yeah. We've got to touch on that. You're listening to Women Winning Divorce with Heather Quick, owner and attorney of Florida Women's Law Group. We're going to take a quick break here, but when we return, we're going to talk more about parenting plans and what to include. Stay with us. Welcome back to Women Winning Divorce with Heather Quick, owner and attorney of Florida Women's Law Group. Heather, what are we going to include in this 20-page document? I mean, 20 pages, that's a lot.
Oh, it is a lot. Okay, so there is a lot of standard stuff. Okay, so one of the things, so let's start with, there is some, it is boilerplate language, meaning it's going to be in every parenting plan, but it's important. And this is the phrase that talks about, it's called shared parental responsibility. And that is just a legal term to basically say you both get to make decisions. I think that a common language, common talk that we'll hear, and I've heard certainly, and whether from movies or TV, I want sole custody. I want, my child 100% of the time doesn't, get any involvement with the dad or whatever. Okay, that is a very rare instance. And that's going to be instances where your spouse has serious issues, substance abuse, violence, in jail, criminal activity, like definitely really just unable. So it's not something that is done typically. There have to be extreme circumstances. When there are, that's absolutely appropriate. So in every other case, which is going to be, 80% at least, probably more, you've got to share. You both get to decide where they go to school. You both get to decide where they go to church or what religion we're going to be. And we both get to decide healthcare, or we both have input. I guess that is the better word, because that's when sometimes there can be difficulties. And that's under this huge part. And that's like 2 or 3 pages under shared parental responsibility, and talking about, hey, you're not going to disparage the parent in front of the other. You're kind of all the like, hey, these are the golden rules, treat others the way you would want to be treated, be nice, get along, communicate, make sure you don't just move somewhere and don't provide your address and phone number. A lot of that is under the shared parental responsibility.
Okay, yeah, you just included so many things that I did not think would even be included, because I'm thinking, why would you move somewhere and not share your address and phone number?
Oh, just, you just to get to the other person sometimes, sometimes things happen, and I mean, obviously there could be reasons if there is violence, but then that would be addressed in other cases. But yeah, things happen, and I really can tell you whether it's true or not. They will, maybe somebody will say, well, they're stalking me, or they don't like my new girlfriend, wife, whatever, so we don't want her to know where we live. Well, you can't do that, because you got to know where your children are. You have a right to know where your children are. So if, you're have the children, you need to provide information. And one of the ways like that they can really, if somebody moves into a gated community, then they can really limit and make it more difficult for you when you have to pick up your kids and things like that. So there's a lot of little things that are just kind of like, like if you look at that little, like a little knife, and like, you're turning it, and like, here you go. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people that feel that way. And even after the divorce, and they just use things to try to just get back. It's not a healthy way to live.
Okay. Yeah, especially with the gated community thing. I mean, you can really slow them down. Is if you have a guard at the gate, and you tell the guard, don't let this person in with this license plate or what have you, you can really slow them down.
Yeah. And those, again, can be extreme, or just make them call every time and not on the list. And just there's a lot of little things you can just really do that are kind of where a lot of this stuff comes from. And, even childcare and who's going to watch the kids after and how will that be handled. That's in the parenting plan. And, in access, telephone access. I have had cases in the past where, the ex-husband's like, no, you can't call me on the phone. And, the judges get pretty mad about that. They're like, well, you have to be able to communicate. And if you're not willing to speak on the telephone to your ex, that's a problem. But that happens a lot. Unfortunately. And it's just, they got to communicate via text or a program we're going to talk about later, like different kind of apps and the way technology can help folks with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, so be sure to listen in for segment 3. We're going to talk about apps for co-parenting. So let's talk about some of the other things that's included in the parenting plan. I notice it says clear outline that details the time the child will spend with each parent. And it says clear outline. So not just, oh, you'll have them on weekends and then possibly on Wednesdays, but it is more detailed than that.
Correct. And it does depend on what the schedule is. So when children are young, the research, the experts, really say, and when I say young, let's say like 4 and under, maybe 5, really it's frequent contact. So you want to have a lot of contact back and forth. Unfortunately, that creates a lot of exchanges, sometimes with the children, but basically 2 days with one parent, 2 days with another, and then a long weekend. And the kids settle in, people can settle into it, but you would have like almost a picture of a calendar in the parenting plan to show how that would work out. Sometimes it's, every other Thursday through Monday, and then it'll say, but then if it's a 3-day weekend, then it goes to the next day. And it will talk about, you want it to address spring break. And then of course, now I will say I'm going to say all of the Christian holidays, but that is in the standard, guidelines. So that's important to know that. And it also is because if we look at our general primary schools, they do follow that. Everybody has a winter break. Does that encompass the Jewish holidays? No. So you're going to have to address that if that is what's, going on in your case, because it's only really addressing the Christian holidays from the first part of the school getting off to the second half. And so those are reasons that you really do need to pay attention to it and understand that there's guidelines, but they are really based on our kids' school calendars that address, they have holidays, 3-day weekends that are either a planning day or national holidays, or they tend to be around the Christian holidays. So it's important to know that you really do want to read that and know what you want, what you're expecting, and how do we need to personalize this for your family. And then it does talk about, extracurricular activities, finances, transportation, and things like that. And those do relate to child support, but that is going to be in the parenting plan.
Okay. And another big one that I noticed is healthcare and medical decisions. Does this topic seem to be, well, I don't want to say controversial, but this is an important topic that both parents look at really closely. Am I right?
Yeah, when that is a disagreement, tends to be kind of philosophically, like people have, as you can imagine, they have clear beliefs and ideas as it relates to their children on areas of healthcare, education, and religion. Now, of course, I'm not even going to touch religion, like that's because it's so, it's the separation of church and state and become quite an issue in these cases. But the healthcare and medical, it's really some of the saddest stuff I've ever seen when one parent, you know, has taken the child and they have diagnoses and the doctor has prescribed medicine and the other parent disagrees and doesn't believe it exists and doesn't provide them with their medication when they're with that person. And that those are really sad things. It's difficult because the child's clearly suffering. Whether you agree or disagree with either side, I mean, the courts, you end up going back to court and the courts are going to definitely rely on experts that are going to testify as far as what's in the child's best interest. But those things can become extremely heated. And I mean, you just look and see what in general people, you know, take a stance on. I mean, that happens in marriages too. And, you know, they disagree on healthcare, medical decisions, education, and that's tough. And you can't get to an agreement. You've got to go to the judge. And I have done that, and our team has done that on multiple occasions.
And I know with the parenting plan, in regards to that, you try to come up or you try to deal with every possible issue, but that is not an issue that can easily be thought of.
Many times it's not because it hasn't even come up. And so then you have to deal with it. Yeah. I mean, it's tough, Julie. It's hard for people. They are, I believe, you know, when they have real disagreements and you want to believe it's coming from, you know, the right place and they really only want the best for their children. But when they disagree and how to handle it, or in education too, it can be difficult. So you've got to talk to a lawyer and figure out, hey, how much of a chance do I have prevailing at this?
Wow. So, like we just said, you try to address all possible issues. You mentioned extracurricular activities, but this is something that, depending on the time frame of the divorce, as far as how old the child is, buying a car for the child and car insurance, that's I didn't think of that.
And again, the judge is not going to necessarily order that, but so that would be something you'd want to agree on. Because, you know, many times because the car insurance has got to be linked to the person with whom they're designated at, you know, insurance. And that's a huge cost. It's not part of child support. It's just, you know, a lot of things. And of course, when your kids are 9 and 10, you're not even really thinking that far ahead.
But as their attorney, as their lawyer, do you help them get to that point, even though it's, you know, 7, 8 years away?
We try to. A lot of this stuff, though, you don't want to complicate it. So it does depend on their particular circumstances and how agreeable they are. People who are really in relative agreement, they're going to be like, we'll figure it out. We always, you know, we'll be able to work together. But if it's something, many times it's an issue we want to discuss because, okay, they've got 5 kids. The first 3 all got cars. And now the mom's like, okay, well, is he going to get them a car? Because he's always bought them a new car or given them a car. You know, how are we going to address that? And then that's really valid because they have a pattern of what they've done in the past. And so then it makes a lot more sense. If they've never done it and they don't know how they want to approach it, it might be harder to come to an agreement.
Okay, so let's use that example. So let's say that has been the pattern in the past with the prior 3 children. I agree to it for the other 2 because we're in the midst of this divorce. And then I lose my job. I lose a lot. I just don't have it. What happens?
It is what it is. It's just like if you agree to pay for private school and then you don't have the ability, the judge is not going to make you do that. So, but it doesn't mean it's not worthwhile to agree to these things and try to discuss these things when you're in mediation and going through those issues. But yeah, but it's worthwhile. Like, and if you're going to agree to pay college, that's great. Is it going to be enforceable? To some extent, but again, it's if you can't pay and it's not something that legally you have an obligation to do, yes, you're under contract, but it can just get sticky as far as how much, like, what will you really get in court? You'll get a paper that says, okay, he should do this when he's able. I don't see, I mean, that happens in some cases, not always. I mean, and it's difficult, but it's, if people are agreeing and coming to an agreement in good faith, I would say, hey, if you guys are trying to do this in good faith, do it. Because then maybe you're not going to have that issue. And at least you've agreed, you've said, hey, this is what we agree to. And you just need to understand, hey, this may or may not be enforceable. What are you compromising to get him to say he's going to continue to pay this? Is that going to be worth it? If that makes sense, I mean.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. And I have so many more questions. You're listening to Women Winning Divorce with Heather Quick, owner and attorney of Florida Women's Law Group. We're going to take a quick break here. And when we return, we're going to talk more about what to include in a parenting plan because I have more questions. We're also going to talk about apps for co-parenting. Stay with us. Welcome back to Women Winning Divorce with Heather Quick, owner and attorney of Florida Women's Law Group. Heather, something I wanted to ask you in our second segment, but we ran out of time. And I feel like you mentioned this briefly, but I really want to touch on this so people understand how important this is. Is it easy to go back to court and get this plan modified, the parenting plan?
No, that is a big no. And so for anybody who is going through this, and if you are ever told you can go back and change it, that is horrible advice. And you really need to get a second opinion because it's very difficult. Do not ever enter into one of these things thinking I'll come back and change it as if that's some easy thing to do. Because you have to prove a change in circumstances and now that this is in their best interest. And in many cases, that is even more lengthy and costly than your original divorce.
Oh, talk about money. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, it really is. And some things are unavoidable and not, you can't do anything about it. But many times what we're going in to modify is I have had clients tell me, well, that attorney told me I can just go back. And that's why I'm so emphatic because just go back to court. Who wants to go back to court? You have to for certain things for sure. But it's costly, time consuming, and it's not something you should look at as lightly changing. It's going to be very difficult.
Okay, so don't look at that as an option. Try to get it right the first time as much as you can.
Right. As much as things are going to happen. I mean, you can't write every single thing down. Things are going to happen. People change, their circumstances change, but as a general, like, oh, I'm going to agree to 50-50 because he's giving me such a hard time and I'll go back and change it. Like, that is not true. That is not a good premise with which to agree to things. But sometimes people do because they just are like, I know what I am giving or gaining in an effort to agree to this. And, if you understand it's not going to necessarily be easy to go back and change it, then you kind of, at least you're doing that knowingly, intelligently.
And you make that clear to your clients.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. Now let's talk about these apps for co-parenting. There is an app for everything. I had no idea this even existed. Maybe I should just go in the app store and check things out because I didn't know this was something. Like, this is a thing.
Oh, this is big business and helpful. Certainly for people because you can, I mean, there's, as we know, an app for everything, even things I don't even know exist, but it can help in communication and it can help keep documents organized as well. Because within the parenting plan, like this is a standard example, any out-of-pocket medical expenses will be split, at a percentage. So that means, though, if you go and pay for your copay at the doctor, which, $30, $60, you need to then like send them that. Well, that used to be like a total pain in the neck because, before all these apps and iPhones, you'd be like, I've got to make a copy of this and send it to them. So now you can just take a picture, put it on the app, and, yes, it takes effort and organization, but all of that money adds up. So it's really important that you are making sure, if, hey, they're supposed to pay all this out of pocket, you want to keep track of it.
All righty. So let's talk about these apps. I'm sitting here. I'm in front of my computer as we speak, and I looked up one of the apps. Tell me about some of these apps.
Okay, so they can one that's very helpful is like scheduling. So there are like just like a family calendar that can be extremely helpful in documenting like who's going to have them, especially if maybe you do have to make a change in the schedule, but even if not. And as the kids get older, then they know, oh yeah, this week I've got this. So that there are a lot of family calendars. Some people can just even use the Google Calendar, but there's a lot of apps that help with that. Some that are very specific for divorced parents there's one called the Family Wizard. Family Wizard's really good, very popular in this jurisdiction because it's a full record of communication that, in theory, well, and I mean, because it's an app, you don't have control over it like your email. You can't doctor it up. So there is a level of authenticity to it. And also one called Parentship and one called We Parent. They charge, they're not free, but in high conflict situations, it's worth it. Sometimes ordered by the court.
Oh, okay. So I didn't realize that. So they can tell you, they can say, okay, this is the way you're going to do this, and you will pay the fee.
Yes. Yes. And what? And sometimes one or the other of the parties, we've had motions where we've asked for it because we're like, if it's just a lot of verbal communication that isn't, and there's a record, that can be a problem. So you're like, we need to have clear communication. And when, I say, when you say you're picking them up, I need to know you're picking them up and there's a record of that if you don't. Or if I've told you XYZ on their schedule, on their, whatever they have with their sports, there's a really solid record. And so that can be very helpful.
I look at these, I'm looking at the websites for a couple of these, the apps that are here, and it seems like this could also help you just maintain a respectful relationship. I may not even have to talk to you, but everything is right there in the app, so we can keep track of everything for the sake of our child.
Yes, and that's the reason that they do it. They just aren't able to have conversations. And and that's just the way that is sometimes. There are sometimes, and there's just so much anger, animosity, so much has happened. It's just they're not able. So you know what? There's the app for that. So then you can communicate in writing. And there's a lot of downsides to that, after a while, sometimes you're like, all right, I think we need to talk because things can get a lot more heated without things being in perspective or the tone of voice or whatever, but sometimes it's really helpful. There are a lot of people that really need that, and it makes their lives easier and better for their kids.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you think about the schedules that, your children may have. One is in soccer, one is in ballet, another is in softball or what have you. I mean, that's a lot to keep up with and to have to share with someone else so they know as well.
So much so. Yeah, it just really I feel like there's so much good that can come out of that. And if both people embrace it and use it for what it's intended, which is to improve communication and keep things a little bit more fluid and civil. It's great. If you're using it just to do gotchas and trying to set the other person up, which does happen, it may not work as well. But for the majority of people, I think it works great.
Yeah, yeah, it does seem like that it could help. And also, I'm looking and it helps with medical forms and insurance information. Being able to keep all of these things in one place, that can just help with your own sanity as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot, and there's enough in a family that is together. So just think when you're not, it's just can really help. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. And also keeping track of expenses, it helps with that as well.
It does. It does. And it's one place where everything can be together. And that's important.
And just in case, let's say you have to go back to court, this will be your proof, or it may also be to your detriment. It just depends on what side you're on.
Well, it's true because that's, we talked about contempt and enforcement in a prior um show, and this would be one of the things. They haven't reimbursed you. And look at that great record. You just took a photo each time, added it to it, and they don't ever pay. And there it was, easily communicated through the app. So it's definitely can be to your advantage.
Yes, and if you want to listen to the show that Heather just mentioned, you can go to our website, womenwinningdivorce.com, and download, listen, and also set up an alert so you can know every time the podcast is posted. Heather, anything else you want to add on this topic?
Well, I just want to say, as I usually do, is that these things can be difficult. We went into like this high level view. And I know I talked a lot, and then you didn't even really get to follow up on all the questions that I know you had. So, I really just encourage any woman who is in this process or thinking about a divorce and maybe feels overwhelmed, just to reach out to us and let us help you at Florida Women's Law Group go through this, because we do it all the time. And that's why I can so easily talk about it and all the many issues. But when you have never done this, it can seem overwhelming.
You know what, Heather? I'm so glad you said that. Look at that. We work so well together. There is something I wanted to ask you about. And it's something, let's say you touched on it just a little bit, but I know that this is something that happens, in families. What if one of the parents, they have an addiction or a questionable lifestyle? How does that work with a parenting plan?
Well, and that may be where there are issues that require supervision during visits, no overnights. In many cases, there are these another app for alcohol detection, like breathalyzer. So that, yes, there would be very specific things in the parenting plan based upon that in supervision.
Okay. So what if, let's say that parent that, had these issues and they worked through them, would that be a way to go back to court and get the parenting plan changed, um, if they've worked through those issues and they've proven themselves? Would that be a good reason to go back to court?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and typically there's going to be some guidelines on that, within the parenting plan, maybe, but maybe not. They're like, you go back when you've done whatever we require of you, or you've, done all this supervision, gotten yourself in a better state. Absolutely. That is a substantial change in circumstances that warrants returning to court.
And it also sounds like that would be a good reason because, as we've discussed on this show before, the child needs each parent.
Yes. Yes. And each parent when they are in a healthy, productive state. And, and when they are, then yes, the court is going to do that.
Okay. All righty. Now I think that's it. That's it, Heather.
Well,
Wow.
good. And I know that so many people will have these kind of questions, Julie. So I thank you for asking me that and following up with it.
Yeah, it's just something that so many families deal with, and it affects everyone, no matter how much money you make, no matter how you look. It affects us all.
That is the truth. It does. So thank you for adding that. And, for anyone I know going through this and questions, please reach out.
Heather, it's always a pleasure.
My pleasure indeed. Thank you so much, Julie.
We'll see you next time.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for listening to Women Winning Divorce. We hope you found information to help you navigate your divorce. If you like our show, please take the time to subscribe and provide a 5-star review. If you need more information, please visit our website at womenwinningdivorce.com, where you will find previous episodes and other helpful content. Join us next week as we continue our journey of women winning divorce.
Tobacco-Free Florida knows how hard it is to quit nicotine, which is why we offer different quit options to choose from for free, like 24/7 quit coaches available over the phone and free 2-week starter kits of quit aids. We're even experimenting with 80s pop music.
I'm giving you up, giving you up, giving you up. I'm letting you never come back to stop. I'll never come back to stop. I'll never come back. I'm giving you up.
Or maybe we'll just stick to the ways we know work. Visit tobaccofreeflorida.com or call 1-877-YOU-CAN-NOW for free.